far from dying down in Ukrainian capital Kiev, with the standoff still continuing at the governmental quarter. The rioters and the police are still exchanging Molotov cocktails and flashbangs. Several hundred people are injured in hospitals, including more than 100 policemen, which is something unprecedented. Also in the night we saw something peculiar, a case of vigilantism in the streets of Kiev with civilian groups basically organizing something like a safari on what they describe as government provocateurs, catching them, bringing them to the streets of Kiev, urging them to apologize for supporting the government and for acting on behalf of the government. I went to the governmental quarter, and here's my report from there. The situation in Kiev has been very tense all throughout the night. There was an attempt by the police to push the protesters off the Grushevskovo Street, the governmental quarter. It was done pretty much unviolently. There were no scuffles. They were just pushing the protesters off. The first thing they did, they destroyed the catapult, a medieval weapon which the protesters had earlier built to hurl Molotov cocktails and rocks at the police lines. They destroyed this catapult in a matter of seconds, basically. After that, some reinforcements of the protesters came from the Independence Square and charged at the police. So the police actually took a few steps back, and right now only a few dozen meters separate the police and the protesters. We can see a water cannon standing right in the middle of the police lines. There was information coming from a local media that the police actually warned that they may use weapons against protesters if they continue their violent behavior. Indeed, we have seen, and we're seeing it all the time, that Molotov cocktails are being thrown at the police. The firecrackers, smoke bombs are being exploded from time to time. It is still definitely a hotbed of tension. Also, there are numerous reports that unidentified men in sports costumes are organizing scuffles all across the Ukrainian capital. Still unclear what the purpose of that is, but it certainly creates a very worrying feeling here. So the situation is still very tense, and it's really unclear where it's going to go. We do know that President Yanukovych has been calling for a negotiation with the opposition leaders. Some talk has already been held, though we understand it was held behind closed doors and no information has come out. But definitely, as to this moment, there has been no political solution to this crisis, as we can see.
The protests first spiraled out of control over the weekend. Most of those injured were policemen diagnosed with head injuries, stab wounds and poisoning. But the US and the EU justified the unrest by saying it was provoked by the Ukrainian authorities. Serb historian and Ukraine affairs analyst Nebojša Malić says at this point there's nothing the government could do to satisfy the West.
Ask yourself, would any Western government confronted with the exact same problem or even something a lot milder, how would they respond? I think the default response from the West is that the Ukrainian government can do no right, so whatever they do, they're going to be condemned for it. So they may as well, I figure, and I'm guessing that from their behavior that they're figuring it as well, they may as well do everything they can in their power to secure the rule of law, to suppress the violent protesters, and to make sure that this does not boil over into civil war. I think a modicum of force is appropriate when you're facing violent protesters. You have to send a message that this will not be tolerated. You have to send a message that you stand firm and that lawbreakers will not be allowed to run rampant. And I think from what I've seen, they've acted with remarkable restraint, especially, again, compared to what Western law enforcement would routinely do in such circumstances.
The riots in Kiev have highlighted a rise in nationalist movements and extremism. And Voice of Russia's political analyst Dmitry Babich believes opposition leaders are trying to cover up their radical side.
Yatsenyuk, Klitschko and other so-called moderate nationalist leaders, although they are not moderate by European standards, first they failed to sort of condemn these actions of neo-Nazis. They failed to separate themselves from the neo-Nazis. At some time they even denied that neo-Nazis were involved. They said these were all provocateurs from Yanukovych, which was a blatant lie. We see now that this is serious. I mean, how can Yanukovych burn his own buses and throw Molotov cocktails at his own police? So these people were active from the very beginning, and it's a shame for the Western press not to notice them now, not to have noticed them in 2004 and 2005, and to feed all of these lies to the Western public about civil society and about nice Ukrainian liberals. these are not liberals, these are neo-Nazis.
Amid the tension in the Ukrainian capital, RT International will keep you up to date with the events throughout the day. And also you can log on to rt.com for live updates from Kiev.